I think we'll get started then. It's 1 o'clock. Welcome everyone. For those that don't know who I am, I'm Judy. I'm the president of Halifax Center for 2020. Welcome all members, as well as those, as we say out east, from away. So this is our third online webinar with all our members, and I think we've got a pretty good agenda for you, and we're pretty excited about it all. The panelists that we have with us today, although I don't see the other Paul here yet, but Dave Chapman is here. He's our observing chair. Pat Kelly, who is one of our board directors, as well as our national rep to the National Council. Paul Heath, who is our observing chair. Sorry, outreach chair, my apologies. And Tim Doucette, who is our guest speaker today. So welcome, Tim. We'll go more into an introduction later on. So welcome, everyone. Just a couple of things about the meeting itself. It is being recorded, so that if you have to leave at any point during this meeting, you will be able to see the full thing on our RASC YouTube site. If you have a question, if you notice at the bottom of your screen, there is a section for chat. You can click on that and chat. And there is a Q&A segment there as well. If you would confine the Q&A section just to Q&A, and that way it'd be easier to track questions versus comments, and use the chat for general comments, if you would, please. If you're not speaking, please mute your mics. And yet again, Pat will not be bringing you cookies and treats today. So our apologies for that. And I'm sure Pat will be appreciative of the fact he doesn't have to deliver. So one of the things I like to point out for folks that haven't or aren't members of RASC, there are numerous benefits to becoming a member. One of them, this is where I'm going to take off my video because, not video, trying to see where you can see this. Anyway, the Observer's Handbook is certainly one of the benefits of, thank you, Paul. Anyway, the Observer's Handbook is certainly one of the perks with your membership. You get it new every year. Also, Sky News, which is the news of the magazine for the center. Oop, guess what? Can you see that? Thank you. And that's the previous edition. There is a newer one out, but that's the May-June edition that Paul is holding up. And there's also the Journal, which is the science magazine for the center as well. Those come automatically with your membership as well. Along with that, one of the things that you don't realize that you get for free is a phenomenal group of people with which to socialize and commiserate when it's cloudy like it has been lately, and certainly to mentor you and to ask questions of and get answers about everything astronomy related. And I must admit that the crew of people here in Halifax Center was one of the main reasons why I decided to join myself as a member. So I'm sure newbies to the center will also enjoy that. From the Halifax Center perspective, you do get a subscription to our own newsletter called Nova Notes, and also to our resources such as our observatory and to our library. I should also note that as a national member, there are some presentations that non-members would not have access to. So that's another perk of joining. So I'm going to share my screen for a moment. And this is the agenda for today. We're just going through the welcome and introductions. Paul Gray, if he does come to this meeting, will show a photo montage. If not, we will go right to Dave Chapman with his What's Up in the June Sky and perhaps beyond that. I'll then give a presentation about news from the board, both here at the center and as well as national. Pat Kelly will give our Observer Handbook presentation on Twilight and Sidereal times. Paul Heath will do a presentation on how to make your own solar system, which will be quite neat to see. And then we have our very special guest, Tim Doucette from Yarmouth Way, who will present Cap the Light, Save the Night. And I'm sure he will have some really wonderful news to share with us. So Is, let's see, is Paul with us? Paul is not, is he? Okay, so Dave, I will leave it to you to do the what's up, if you would, please.
Okay, well, thanks very much for having me. The what's up is a bit different this month because it's practically halfway through the month and I do them monthly. So some of the things I'm going to tell you about have already happened. So for future reference, what I do is I prepare them for the calendar month, and they're posted. The PowerPoint's actually posted to the RASC Halifax website on the 1st of the month. So you can go there on the 1st of the month and look at the presentation, even if the meeting hasn't happened yet. Usually the meeting happens within a few days, but this month it's a little different. Anyway, here we go. I'm going to see if I can do this. Yeah. Everybody see that? Hello? Can you see it? Somebody?
Yeah, yeah, no problem.
All I got is a blank screen, black screen.
Okay, well, I can't help you, Paul. Everybody else can see it, so we'll have to deal with your Zoom issues later. It's there for everybody. Okay, so what's up this June, and then some. I'm going to put in a few things for the rest of the year as well. So let's talk about the sun. June is an interesting month because we have the summer solstice on the 21st. So the conditions, the circumstances at the beginning and the end of the month don't change very much. So actually between now and the end of the month, or even into July, the sunset time doesn't vary more than 5 minutes from 9 o'clock. And of course, this is because around the solstice times, the day length doesn't change very much because the sun actually stops moving in declination on the solstice. So it's because the length of the day and night are dependent on the declination of the sun. Since it's not changing, it doesn't, the day and night and twilight doesn't change much throughout the month. So the sunset pretty much is always at 9. And that means that the end of twilight is between 11:15 and 11:30. We only have 3.9 hours or so of darkness, 3.6. And if you feel hard done by, just be glad you don't live in RASC Centers, Winnipeg and West, because at this time of year they have no dark skies. It's perpetual twilight or midnight twilight throughout the whole night. So we're fortunate because we're at a relatively low latitude that we have some dark skies. But some of the folks out west who are at higher latitudes, they basically observe the moon, they observe the planets, but they don't do any deep sky. For them, it's spring and fall for that kind of observing. So dawn starts a little after 3. I don't know if anyone's noticed it, but it does get pretty light early in the morning and the birds start singing. Sunrise is around 5:30. Noon is around 1:15, and of course that's because it's daylight saving time. And we get about 15.5 hours of sunlight, which is great if you're a gardener, which I am. And the sun, of course, is at its highest in the sky at noon, about a third of the way to the, actually more than a third. My math skills are being challenged right now. It's quite a ways towards the zenith. So I have these little graphics here that I created, and if you go online to the online version of this at the website, you can follow that YouTube link and see a movie of how day and night change throughout the year. I'm not going to do that now, but if you have a couple of minutes to blow afterwards, go and check that out. It's on our RASC Halifax YouTube channel. Okay. As for the moon, the full moon is already past June 5th, and there was also a bit of a conjunction on the 8th and 9th of June where the moon was near Saturn and Jupiter. That's already passed. I guess, what's today? I guess the last quarter is today. I don't know if we're going to get a clear sky to see the last quarter. Of course, that'll rise pretty late, like after midnight or so. The really cool thing involving the moon is on June 19th, where the moon occults the planet Venus. Now, this happens in the morning, and we don't see the ingress. The moon is actually below. Let me think now. We don't see the moon and Venus are below the horizon when it starts, but we can see the egress, but it'll be in twilight. But I think that might be a challenge. It might be fun if you've got a nice northeast horizon. Might be worth trying to see if you could see Venus come out from behind the moon. The downside is you have to get up early, 5:07. Hey, it's astronomy. Now, let's see if I can do this magic. The full moon, I can't go into it, but we're having, from the Mi'kmaq point of view, that we're having two moon times in a row with the same name. And that's because every 3 years or so, we have to put in an extra cycle in order to keep things lined up. I haven't got time to explain it at the moment, but I am doing a Cosmos from the Couch webinar this coming Tuesday from the Dunlap Institute at, I think, 8 o'clock our time, where Kathy and I are going to be doing a whole hour on the Mi'kmaq moons. If anyone wants to tune into that, I've sent it around to people in the club. Anyway, I'll be explaining the circumstances of the moon. Now I'm going to see if I can stop share and start again, because I want to play this. This is Curtis Michael teaching you how to pronounce, oh, it's the wrong one. Oh, okay. Let me, here we go. Oh, let's try that again.
Nibinigus, trees, fully leafed moon. Nibinigus, the word nibi means leaf in Mi'kmaq. Also, the word nibk means summertime, the season. Once again, Nibinigus, trees, fully leafed moon.
I hope you heard that. Okay, good. So the very last frame of that, we have 12 of those videos. And at the end of each one, we have a range of dates where, oops, sorry.
Birds laying eggs.
Okay. I'm being really challenged today. What are you seeing on the screen at the moment?
You.
Me, okay. Well, that's okay. What was I going to say? If you saw the last frame of that movie, it said, look for the trees fully leaved moon between, I think, June the 4th and July the 6th or something like that. Well, it turns out there's two full moons between June 4th and July 6th. And so that's why there's two trees fully leaved moons. I mean, that's the simple answer. Now, that's not traditional knowledge. That's me doing astronomy and applying two-eyed seeing. So using astronomy to assist the traditional ways. So that's not how the Mi'kmaq would see it. They would see it in a different way by just comparing the moon to what's going around in nature, because they didn't have the math and astronomy that Western science uses to explain all of those things. So how do I get back to screen sharing? I think I'm getting this. Are we good? Are we seeing the moon?
Yep, you're doing fine.
Great. Okay. Phew. Good. Okay. So this is the moon. The features of the moon that's in the Explore the Universe program, which is open to everyone. You can get if you do Explore the Universe, you don't have to be a member. You can still get a pin and a certificate. And the number of features that you need to find on the moon are not very many. Yeah, there's 12 craters and 12 mare, or seas. Well, they're not really seas, you know that. They're lava plains. But the ancients thought they were seas. Anyway, in order to earn your lunar part of Explore the Universe, you have to find half of each of this list. So it's not really that hard. You can do it. Well, you certainly need binoculars. I don't think, if you could do it with your naked eye, I'd give you an extra pin. But anyway, with binoculars, you can pick out these, well, you can certainly pick out the mare, no sweat. And you can pick out a lot of these big craters. So now the moon, for convenient evening viewing, it won't come around till the end of the month. But anyhow, you might want to start working on your Explore the Universe moon part when the end of the month comes around. So the challenge is to try to observe 3 of these in binoculars. Now, the planets. Well, Mercury already had its greatest eastern elongation okay, so that means it was in the evening sky, in the western sky, and it was the farthest east it would be. That was on June the 4th, and it moves pretty quick, so you won't find it there easily anymore. And that was the best, for us, that was the best apparition in 2020. So if you didn't see Mercury, you might be able to see it again, but that was the best opportunity. Venus had a close inferior conjunction June the 3rd. And when I say close, these things go in cycles. And 8 years ago and 16 years ago, there were transits of Venus at inferior conjunction. And there won't be any for quite a long time. I can't remember, 100 and something years. Anyhow, I'm wearing today, you might have noticed I'm wearing my Transit of Venus t-shirt because in honor of that event, I observed that in 2012. So after that, it's now in the eastern morning sky, if you get up early enough. I mentioned that it was going to have that occultation reappearance on June 19th. So if you're an early riser, you might see Venus in I guess, the northeast. By the end of the month, Mars is going to be minus 0.5 magnitude and with a disk more than 11 seconds of arc. It's, it's time to start observing in telescopes. It's still a bit tiny, but you should be able to start seeing markings on Mars and certainly see a disk. And if you can't find Mars on the 13th of June, it's near the moon, but it should appear as a pretty bright reddish star in the morning sky. And Jupiter and Saturn, they're basically in the morning sky. They transit around 3:30, which means that they'll be highest in the sky due south around 3:30. So they're kind of a morning object. And I mentioned that they were close to the moon 8th and 9th. If you're looking for Neptune, you should be able to find it near Mars and the moon on, this morning. Okay, well, it might still be near Mars tomorrow, maybe not the moon, but if you can find Mars, you should be able to find Neptune. Look in your observer's handbook. Uranus is out of the picture. No Uranus. And that's it for the planets. Okay, so it's officially summer, I say. Oh, why does it say July 1st? Okay, yeah, I found an intermediate date. Anyway, I go by the weather people, and they say that June 1st is the beginning of summer because the solstice is in the month of June. So they just make it easy. It's summer, believe it or not. So now we're going to talk about the summer constellations. We've been doing the spring constellations. So these are fairly easy to find. Certainly Hercules, there's not a lot of bright stars in Hercules, but at least it's overhead most of the time when you go out and it's dark. So not too hard to find. If you're looking for Hercules, if you find the star Arcturus, if you know Arcturus and you know Vega, Hercules sort of occupies that period, that area in between, and it's got a keystone figure here in the middle. Of course, then we've got Lyra, Cygnus, and Aquila, three constellations which sort of straddle the Milky Way. Now the next ones, Scorpius, Sagittarius, and Capricornus, are pretty low in the south sky. So to see those, you have to have a good southern horizon. So Sagittarius is pretty low down. Capricornus, I guess I've never really thought of that as a summer constellation, but that's how it appears in Explore the Universe. So there you have it. But it's only really rising at late in the evening. As for bright stars, there's quite a few bright stars in the summer sky. Of course, the big four are Vega, Altair, Deneb, and Antares. I've got them right there, ranking in brightness. So of course, the summer triangle is, oops, oh dear. Yeah, the summer triangle is Deneb, Altair, and Vega. We'll be seeing that for a long time. Even into fall, we'll be seeing the summer triangle. It's also known around the Halifax Center as the constellation Dave, for D, A, and VE. Vega gets, I guess Vega gets 2 letters because it's the brightest one. So D-A-V-E spells Dave. It's the constellation Dave. And Blair MacDonald's daughters actually believe that. That's how they see it. We taught it to them a few years ago, and that's how they see it. Inside of all that is a very interesting star called Albireo, which is a colored double star, one of the finest in the sky. You can pick it out in binoculars. It looks even better in telescope. Small telescope is okay. Razel-Gethy, I guess it's in there because it's the brightest star in Hercules, but that's not saying much. It's not a bright star. It's not even in the 50 bright stars of the sky. So that one could be a bit of a challenge to find, especially in the city. So you might have to be in a dark sky to see Razel-Gethy. And after that, there's a bunch of, well, Antares is down here. We already mentioned that. That's a bright red star, quite low in the sky. You should be able to pick that out pretty easily. After that, we have a number of, Sagittarius, for all of its wonderful deep sky objects, doesn't have any super bright stars. But the main star is Nunki. And then in Capricornus, there's Algety Prima and Dabi Major. And those two are actually, I think, double stars. Anyhow, I've got N's next to these 4 bright stars over here, and that means they're navigation stars. If you were doing celestial navigation, if you're a celestial navigator on a ship, you're meant to know those. And you can shoot them with your sextant. Nowadays, people use GPS, but sometimes things don't work, right? In terms of deep sky, I had to have 2 pages for this because they're such a great span. So these are all of the deep sky objects in Explore the Universe that are not in Sagittarius. So above us, if you can find Hercules and the keystone of Hercules, you'll be able to find the Hercules cluster, which is a globular cluster. You should be able to pick that out even in the city because it's quite condensed. It might look like a fuzzy star, but that would be the Hercules cluster. Whoops. Oh dear. The other interesting, well, it's actually a cluster of stars. It's a true cluster, Colander 399, but it has the appearance of a coat hanger. Here's a picture of it down here, coat hanger. So I guess it's an asterism as well because it has this shape. That's fun to see in binoculars, and I would say, you know, try that in a dark sky if you ever get out of the city. And to find it, you go between Vega, and Altair, and it's about a third of the way up from Altair. That's where you should look with your binoculars to find that. Down here below Aquila is the wild duck cluster. It's an open cluster. And then there's a nebula, Eagle Nebula. Probably going to need a dark sky for that. Messier 4 is a globular cluster near Antares. You might be able to pick that up in the city, but most of this stuff really benefits from a dark sky. So we'll move on to the Sagittarius only dark sky or deep sky objects that are in Explore the Universe. Interestingly enough, most of these objects are located above the star pattern we normally associate with Sagittarius, so that's kind of curious. The Omega Nebula is obviously a nebula, a gaseous nebula, so is Lagoon. M23 is an open cluster. Sagittarius star cloud, I don't know if it has a Messier number or not. It's a fairly large patch of sky with lots of stars. I mean, there's stars and stuff all over here in the Milky Way. We're looking more or less towards the center of the galaxy. M25 is an open cluster. Oops, geez, what is it doing that? M22 is another globular cluster. There are people who feel that that's even a finer site than the Hercules cluster. It's probably not as well known because it's only visible cleanly a short time of the year, whereas the Hercules cluster is high up in the sky and visible a good part of the year. So the challenge is to go and find the Lagoon Nebula in your binoculars, and I'm pretty much going to guarantee you're going to need a dark sky to see that. So if you ever get camping or a cottage or anything like that, try to go out on a moonless night when the Sagittarius is on the meridian and try to pick some of those things out.
Dave?
Yep.
Chris has raised his hand to ask a question.
Chris Young?
Young? Yeah, so go ahead, Chris. Oop. All right.
Did you unmute him?
I'm trying to. Clicked on mute. It's not working.
Can you, has he typed out his question or?
No, he hasn't. But maybe Chris, you could do that if you would. In the meantime, Graham Rose has asked, is not the Sagittarius star cluster M24?
He might be right. I have to look that up. Messier. Look, I'm using my handbook, by the way. Summer sky, summer sky, summer sky. 24, star cloud. Yes. Doesn't have an NGC number, but is the Sagittarius star cloud. Good on you, Graham Rose. Best in big binoculars, it says.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Chris. I've tried numerous times on both your image as well as on the list itself, and I cannot unmute you. Can you unmute yourself on your screen? If not, please type in your question and we'll make sure Dave answers it for you. And Graham, in answer to you, Dave says, yep, beautiful in 15 by 20s.
Does Chris have to unmute himself as well as you unmuting him? Or
I don't know how this works, but obviously I can't unmute him. Even
Chris and I are buddies. Chris, call me after, and I'd like to talk to you anyway. So give me a call after, and I'll answer your question.
Chris has to have his audio.
Okay, let's move on then.
So Chris, apparently you have to have your audio turned on, because if it's not turned on, then we can't do anything. Do you want to check that out too as well, please?
Okay, so let's move on, and we'll talk about double stars. I haven't done double stars in previous ones, but I thought I'd throw them in. Lyra has actually 3 double stars in Explore the Universe. So there's Zeta and Delta are both double stars. And then of course there's the double Epsilon. Of course, in binoculars, you'd only see the double part of it. To see that each one of those is in fact the double, you'd need a pretty good telescope, I would say, to pick that out, and good seeing. Alberio, I mentioned already, is a nice colored double star. I'll jump down to Algida Prima and Dabi Major. Like I said, I think of them more as fall stars, but they're rising there. You can probably pick them out. Now that you get to Omicron 1 Cygni, which is a triple star. And it's the only triple star that's in Explore the Universe. And it can be a little tricky. If you want any advice on how to observe it, ask Judy. Judy and I worked on that for a bit, trying to pick that out. There's a picture of it there. So it looks like to me, it looks like a little hockey stick. So there's 2 sort of fairly bright stars and then a little one. So anyhow, that's your challenge, to try to find Omicron Cygni. And I think those stars, they're fairly high up in the sky. I think you should be able to even see those in the city in your binoculars. Wouldn't you say, Judy?
Most definitely.
Okay, yeah.
And it's quite a joy that I actually did see it eventually.
Well, it helps if you get your cataracts removed and your lens replacements. And I think there was a big difference before and after.
No question.
See, I was very frustrated in helping Judy with it, but she didn't tell me that she was scheduled for lens replacement surgery. At least if she told me, I forgot. But she had a real problem picking it out before she had her lens replacement surgery. So good on you. Okay, getting near the end. I wasn't going to do a whole what's up for July and August, so I just thought I'd pull out some
Dave,
highlights. Yes?
before we go on, Graham has a correction. It's not 15 by 20s, it's 15 by 80s.
What's 15 by 80? Is that
The binoculars that he said that you could see the, was it M24, I believe?
Well, I mean, you could see, I'm not sure exactly what he's saying. Is he saying he saw them in 15 by 80s?
Yes.
Okay, very nice.
And then Richard Wagner has said, it has been suggested that M24 is actually one of the small open clusters within the Sagittarius star cloud. It better matches the Messier's description.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to look into that. That I was reading from what was in the handbook. So thank you, Richard, from Kingston and Ottawa, for mentioning that. Welcome. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I'll look that up. I've got all kinds of books on Messier. So, okay. Okay, so that's another challenge. Everybody should go look at M24, the Sagittarius star cloud, and see if they can pick out a cluster within it that could in fact be the true M24. Okay, where was I? Okay, the next full moon, as we know, is the 5th of July. Trees fully leaved 2. Venus will be in the morning sky, greatest illuminated extent, very bright in the morning sky on the 10th. Jupiter will be at opposition on the 14th of July. So that means it'll be its biggest it will be this go around, fairly bright. I know Dennis Fell out west has been making some nice drawings of Jupiter and Saturn this season. On the 20th, it's the new moon, and the Saturn will be at opposition. Rings 43 seconds across. August the 3rd, the full moon in August is the birds shedding feathers moon. And again, on the 9th, Mars will be close to the moon. The 12th, is the night of the peak of the Perseid meteor shower. It's not the greatest year for the Perseids because it's the last quarter. In other words, it will barely get dark and then the moon will come up. So there may be a little window in there to see some meteors in a dark sky. On the 13th, Venus will already be at greatest elongation west, which means it's in the morning sky. Then there's a couple of double satellite transit on Jupiter. I can't remember the exact time. It might be kind of a middle of the night thing if you're into that sort of thing. The new moon's on the 19th, which I guess that's when we were going to have our Nova East Star Party, wasn't it? Following that. And on the 28th, I don't even know why I put this in. The dwarf planet Ceres is at opposition, but man, it's only 7.7 magnitude. So it must be pretty close to its aphelion, its farthest distance from the sun, because that's not very bright at all. So if you're looking for other things to find in the sky this summer, definitely check your RASC Observer's Handbook, the sky month by month. The Sky News magazine, which if you remember, you get at your door. And it doesn't matter who you are, you can always go to their website to find out what's up, tonight or what's going on this week. So there's lots of resources there. You won't get a what's up from me in July and August. I'll be taking a break, but I'll have another one in September. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I've removed my background because my loving husband pointed out to me that although we could see you, the panelists can see you, Paul, unless you spoke, no one else could. So just to give them an idea, for those that aren't members, that is the Observer's Handbook that you would be getting every year. Sky News, the latest edition. We have some stuff in there that we'll point out in just a few moments. And certainly, and I unfortunately have an older version of the journal, but that is certainly what you would get from us as well, along with all those other perks. And we'll tell you how to join later. But now I need to share my screen. Share screen. And go here and slideshow. Okay. How's that? Okay. Everyone hear and see that? Hear me and see that?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. It has, over the last year, it's sort of been my habit to give you an update as to what's been happening from the board so that members are aware that we aren't just sitting on our hands and there's a lot of things happening in the background that you should be aware of. And given our current situation with the coronavirus, it's even more critical that members know what's going on. So first and foremost, you're obviously very much aware we are using Zoom. Although we do use the National RASC account for our members meetings, such as today, all our other activities that we perform are on our own center's account. Everything from our board meetings to committee meetings. Our next board meeting, by the way, is this coming Thursday on the 18th. We've had virtual observing sessions and lunar, both deep sky as well as lunar observing. And we've had astroimaging processing sessions, 3 with Blair McDonald with Images Plus and 1 with Jeff Donaldson on PixInsight. And our hope is that we'll continue to use those to keep members engaged. So if members have any suggestions as to what you would like to, any topic you would like addressed, please let me know and we'll see what we can do for you. For those that don't know, we do have our own YouTube site, video site, and with all of our center's videos. Some of them I'd like to highlight now. There's a group of, these are our imaging sessions and observing sessions. There's also our meetings that are on board as well. And if you're really intrigued, there's even a session on constellations and stars and sky stories. And I believe Dave Chapman is very instrumental in getting that one, those stories being told. And also, if you, that was on our videos page. If you go to our home page, it's you can see the series there of the General Assembly talk series that have been posted to date. The 2015 series, thanks to the instigation of Dave Chapman and some funding from National and the Special Funds Project, as well as the expertise of Hallie Davies. These speeches from the 2015 GA are finally being produced, and they will be published here. And we're making folks aware across the country as to when these are becoming available. The Dave Turner, Rhonda Rosenfeld one that you see there was the most recent one, but Dave has recently sent out a notification about Melody and Emma Seabrook, who from Toronto Centre, who at the time were young folk, and they did this really cool project. So you'll be hearing more about that. And certainly the observing programs, the national RASC programs, if you're interested in what they are, certainly go to the site and you'll see the 3 different levels, beginner, intermediate, and advanced, that you can figure out what's what there. Normally this page would be called Stars of Halifax Centre, but it's called Young Stars simply because of the age of our 2 folk. And the purpose of this page on my presentation is to highlight folks who have been published either in our own publications or further afield. And so our first one is Fiona Morris. If you look at your May-June Sky News, there's an article in there called Rising Stars. And in it, she is highlighted. And this is the photograph that was published on her behalf. And that was what she used to obtain that. You can see it written down below the photo as to what she used to obtain that photograph of the Orion Nebula. The second person is another youngster in our group, Keegan Oikel, and he did the Milky Way. You can see the 2, there's the same photograph, but processed at 2 different times. So these folks were both highlighted in the same article in Sky News. At the time these photos were taken, both of these young souls were only 15. So you oldsters out there who are taking astro images, look out. These folk are going to catch up to you and maybe even surpass us. So congratulations, you 2, on being published. The 2020 Halifax Centre Astro Imaging Contest. Yes, there will be a contest again this year. The 4 categories, the 3 categories of that are adjudicated are the wide field, deep sky, and the solar system. And then there will be the People's Choice Award that is chosen by everyone, but by members. These are last year's winners. The criteria remain the same, and they are posted on our Nova East website. Later this month, we'll be letting you know about the later, because we're not holding Nova East, the dates for entry submissions to the contest will be delayed, and we'll keep you posted on those, as well as they'll be delayed till later in the summer, and then the winners will be announced later in early fall. We'll keep you posted on those 2 dates. And as we said in the last month's meeting, that we have canceled our Star Party as a camping event. But we also told you, although we won't be in the park, it will still be smiley. And this is how it's smiley. We have something called Nova East, the COVID-19 edition. The Nova East Planning Committee, because it had worked to get this amazing group of folk together to present at Nova East, determined that we really didn't want to lose that expertise. So we developed a speaker series associated with this. So who is it? Well, it starts on August the 4th with Kathy Walker, and she's going to present some basic image processing. Then David Hoskin on August the 11th with Lucky Imaging and how to photograph astrophotography of the moon and the planets. And then remember I said, keep your eyes open for those youngsters. Well, they are next on the list on August 18th. They're going to address RASC the next generation. Dave Chapman will be having a chat with these two souls about their experiences and how they got into astrophotography. Tony Schelling will be addressing astronomy on the cheap and basically about binoculars and what you can find in the summer and fall skies. Then Paul Heath will show us how to walk the solar system, knows how to build it and how to present it. And then Pat Kelly on September the 8th will talk all about Mars, which is the science of what you're seeing. So that'll be the schedule. We'll keep you apprised as to when the notifications come out to register. These will be registered events, so something really exciting. We're really thrilled to see this happening. So the dates, again, mark your calendars. It's the 4 Tuesdays in August, August 4, 11, 18, 25, and the first 2 Tuesdays in September, the 1st and 8th, at 7 o'clock Atlantic time. So keep an eye out for these. We're really excited about this. Now back to stuff that maybe isn't quite so fun. It's policy stuff. There is a new policy called the RASC Halifax Center Guidelines regarding in-camera sessions. I do want to make sure that people understand that I'm not going to go into details on this. If you want details, you can go to our website. But basically, its purpose is it's for purposes of confidentiality. It's not to keep anything secret. But what we did want to make sure was that there was confidentiality in the discussions that allowed the board to the confidence to express their opinions, and it protects the innocent from false information about them becoming public. And the policy covers the things you can see there about who attends board and committee in-camera sessions, the types of matters that will be that could require in-camera sessions, and minutes or recordings, procedures, and consequences of breaching confidentiality. If you want to find it, you basically go onto our homepage, into About Us, and just hover. You'll see policy documents, and you'll see it listed at the bottom, in-camera sessions. So if you're interested, please read on. So at the national level, what's new? Well, the first item isn't really new. It's the Insider's Guide to the Galaxy. You do have to register. They have been on a 2-week hiatus. Certainly Jenna Hines has certainly deserved a break from this, but it will resume again on the 16th, which is this coming week. And they are Tuesdays, 4:30 to 6 p.m. And again, you have to go to the national site to register. They are offering something really cool starting later this month, the Explore the Universe Online, which every other Thursday, so every 2 weeks, from 4:30 to 5:30. And our very own John Reed, along with National's Jenna Hines, will be the two hosts for this. And basically what's going to be happening is that they will be describing elements of the Explore the Universe program, and then you will have 2 weeks to find those objects. So they're basically going to help you walk through the Explore the Universe program. Once you've proved that you have viewed all these objects, you can then get a certificate at the end of this. So something to look into if you're really excited about that. One of the things that has not been on their website yet, but one thing we do know about, is that there's going to be a speaker series that National's trying to organize, where they have speakers from every one of the centers talk at a point in the year. So centers will be identifying who they would like to see speak on their behalf. And so over the next 30, 30 centers across the country, it'll be quite an extensive series. So that's something to look forward to as well. We'll keep you posted on that. And certainly look at the national website for that as well. And it's official. At the RASC GA and AGM held on June 7th, Colin Haig, who was the awards chair as well as the past president, announced that John Reed did in fact win the Simon Newcomb Award, and that Dave Chapman is in fact now a fellow of the RASC. So congratulations to you both. It's now official. And the plaques that you would have received in person apparently are now en route to you at home. And something else that's official, Catherine Barry, one of our very own members here in Halifax, was given a special award to recognize all the years of her service in putting together the RASC annual report. And in asking how many years, she's been doing it since 2004, or 2006 rather. So she has put together, no, I was right, 2004. She's put together 15 editions of the AGM report. So congratulations to Catherine, and well-deserved, and thank you on behalf of us all for putting that together on our behalf. So I mentioned earlier about all those wonderful perks you get as a member. How do you join? If you aren't one, it's really easy. You can join online just by clicking on the, you can go to the halifaxrasc.ca site or to the national one and join. You can join online, and if you're old school and you prefer to handwrite a paper copy and send in a check, there's also on our site at least a method by which to mail in as well. So to next meeting, our next meeting is September the 12th. I've also made note of the fact on the 1st and the 8th, you'll see the stars. Those are the last two presentations of our Nova East, the COVID edition. And then there's 2 of the sessions for the Explore the Universe that will be held during September on the 3rd and the 17th. And a very special guest on our agenda for September, we have Nicole Montalero. She's a Sky News contributor. She's an author. Interestingly enough, in looking her up, she's also written books about hockey. So that'd be interesting to talk to her about. And a senior reporter for the CBC Science. So she's got a quite extensive career as a science editor. So I will take any questions at this point if anyone would like to, if anyone has any. Okay, I guess while I was speaking, Graham Rose asked, do we not have a lunar eclipse happening in July?
Isn't there an annular eclipse somewhere, Antarctica and South Africa or somewhere like that? It doesn't come to North America, but there's an annular eclipse of the sun in July. I think it's on actually the 7th or 9th.
There might be.
June 11th. June 21st is the annual solar eclipse.
Oh, June 21st. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's not visible here in North America.
No.
Another question I had, I was asked if I was going to be talking about SCO. The board is looking at upgrading the facilities at SCO. More specifically, I guess, the electrification of the site. We're still in the investigation period at this point. So I don't really want to say a whole lot until we've actually established all the details. But we're really excited about it and hoping it can go forward. Okay, if there aren't any other questions, then Pat, you're up with your Observer Handbook presentation, Twilight and Sidereal Times.
Okay, thank you. Let me just get this thing started.
Oh, and I will mention that Dave Chisholm answered, there is a penumbral lunar eclipse on July 5th in Halifax. Not very exciting.
Yeah, look, there's another one later on in the year as well, but they're penumbral, so who really cares?
And Graham has provided a link, so I'll put that into the chat, so if anyone's interested, they can do that.
Okay, so that should be up on everybody's screen, hopefully.
Looks good.
Okay, so for the handbook talk, I decided to pick the section called Astronomical, Twilight, and Sidereal Time, partly because I looked through the ones that hadn't been done yet, and a lot of the things that hadn't been done yet are either really long or are just tables of things. So I thought, this is only one page, it shouldn't take all that long. And Dave Chapman has actually, fortunately, set me up for 2 of the points I wanted to make as part of this talk. I can just emphasize them again. But the other reason I thought I'd bring it up is most people probably skip over it. And it was only when Randall Brooks did something to this section of the handbook, I actually really took it seriously, and it solved one of those things that Dave actually mentioned during his talk, that it always sort of puzzled me as to why it happened. I mean, I knew it happened. I wasn't really quite sure why. So the section in the handbook right now looks like this. I'm just going to show you, just so you know which page it is. You probably flip through and see it. This is the current version. This is the previous version of it. And what Randall wanted to do to it was to make it more complicated. And I'll get back to that a little bit later on. So basically, this page of the handbook has three main parts. It basically has a table, it has a whole bunch of diagonal lines, and it has a bunch of curves. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at each of these separately and see how they all come together, and then show you why it's a really useful part of the handbook to at least be aware of. So the table part is 12 by 12, and it has time on both axes. So it starts up here in the evening. It goes from 6 p.m. through to 12 o'clock midnight, through to the hours that I didn't even know existed while I was a teenager, that there was actually a 3 o'clock and a 4 o'clock a.m. as well as 3 and 4 o'clock p.m. And it ends up here at 6 o'clock. And then across the bottom, you have the months of the year: January, February, March, April, May, June, right through to December. So that's the basic table of information that you sort of want to start to fill in with some useful information. Now, one of the things that you're probably aware of if you've done any bit of astronomy is that there's a coordinate system that's used in astronomy that's very similar to the coordinate system that's used on Earth. On Earth, we call it latitude and longitude. Latitude is based on using the celestial equator, or using the Earth's equator, and we simply measure the degrees on the Earth north or south of the equator. And if we sort of project those lines onto these so-called celestial sphere, we have the celestial equator, which is exactly coincident with the Earth's equator. Just take the Earth's equator and project it out. And then we also have 10 degrees north, 20 degrees north, 30 degrees north, and so on, till you get to plus 90 at the top and minus 90 down here at the very bottom, with the north celestial pole and the south celestial pole. The equivalent to longitude on the Earth are lines running from one pole to the other, from there to there. And rather than using degrees, because it appears to us as though the celestial sphere rotates around us once every 24 hours, they decided to use hours rather than degrees. And the other problem that you have is you have to pick a starting point for it, because on Earth, all of those lines run from the North Pole to the South Pole. There's no real reason to pick one over the other. And what ended up happening was everybody eventually agreed that the line we're going to use to start the counting from is the line that runs through Greenwich in England. So on the celestial sphere, they decided to start the 0 point here at the point where the sun passes from below the celestial equator to north of the celestial equator, which is the vernal equinox, the first day of spring. That marks the 0 point. And then we measured in hours moving towards the east, at least as you're looking at it if you're facing south. So the hours increase from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. 12 is over here behind you, and you come back around to 21, 22, 23, and then you're back to 0 again. And the reason I'm going to mention this vernal equinox is the point where you start, is because this is another way of sort of looking at it. Again, here we have the Earth. Here we have the Earth's equator projected onto the celestial sphere. So this is the celestial equator. Here we have the path that the sun makes on the celestial equator. And in this direction, which happens around March 21st or 22nd, depending on leap years and a few other things, that is the date at which this actually happens. Okay, so far so good. Okay, now comes another slightly different view of it. So this is the view from the Earth at the exact instant the sun is on the celestial equator, passing from south to north. So this is the first day of spring, typically around March the 21st, and that is where we pick the 0 point. And as you can see, as you're looking south, so this is the view sort of looking south, 0 hours is here, 1 hour is to the left, 2 hours to the left again. And again, here we have the ecliptic going up at that 23.5 degree angle and the celestial equator. And if you're looking at this and imagine the screen is wrapped around your head, 12 would be behind your head, and then you come back around again to 23, and then you're back to 0 again. So here's the question. On March the 21st, at local noon, in other words, when the sun is highest in the sky, what right ascension hour is going to be exactly due south on the first day of spring when the sun is up high in the sky? Give you a second to think about it, and let's see if you come up with the correct answer, which is 0. The sun is on 0 hours, so when it's up high in the sky, that is the part of the sky you're going to see. Of course, you can't see the sky because it's daytime. So the next obvious question to ask is, on March 21st, assuming that's the first day of spring, at midnight, what right ascension is now going to be due south? Well, if this is what the sky looks like at noontime, the part of the sky that's opposite the sun, which is the part you see at midnight, is going to be behind your head when you're looking at it this way. So again, if you think about it for a second, you should be able to come up with the idea that it's 12 hours. So now we're going to go back to that table, and we're going to add a point to it. So here's the table, and what we know is that on March 21st, at midnight, 12 hours is the right ascension you see when you're looking exactly due south. So I'm going to put a little 12 there, and notice that it's off-centered. I would have put a little tick mark or a little point on there, but you probably wouldn't be able to see it. So I just stuck the date there. So there we are on March the 21st. 12 hours is going to be the one we see immediately south at midnight. Now we know that the sky appears to rotate around the sun once a day. So once you know that 12 hours is due south at midnight, if you wait an hour, it's going to move until 13 hours is due south. You wait another hour, it's going to move again until 14 hours is due south. So you can fill in the rest of this column and say that on March the 21st at midnight, 12 hours of right ascension is going to be exactly due south. An hour later, it's going to be 13 hours. An hour later, it's going to be 14 hours, and so on. So you can fill in this column. I just put in a few numbers there. I didn't bother filling out the entire thing. It's mainly just to show the point. Okay, what about April? Now let's go back to our little diagram. And if the Earth didn't move around the sun and just sat there and rotated every year, that diagram wouldn't be there. However, what we discover is that there's 24 hours of right ascension going all the way around, and we have 12 months, which means that every month, the point at which you see when you're facing at midnight is going to move through 2 hours of right ascension. So if we go back over here, here's the sun, here's where the Earth is in its orbit on March the 21st, 0 hours is in that direction. When you look out away from the sun, you're looking at 12 hours. And we know that the hour increases as you go in this direction. So 1 month later, on April 21st, the part that's going to be immediately opposite the sun, in other words, the part you're going to see due south at midnight, is going to be 14 hours. And you can do the same thing for the rest of the months. So now let's go back to our table. So there we have the table I just showed you where I filled in the 12, and by knowing that we could fill in the rest of it. We're going to move 1 month, which is going to jump us by 2 hours. And we know that on April 21st, 14 hours is going to be due south. And again, we can fill it in going up and we can fill it in going down. Now you should be able to see from this, there's a pretty clear pattern starting to emerge. So if you now want to say, well, what's it going to be in May? Well, if this is 12 and this is 14, May 21st is going to be 16. So you can start filling this table in. But that's a really cluttered diagram with all the numbers there. So let's do something a little bit different. Let's take all of these 12s, that one, and that one, and that one, and let's just connect them with a line, like that. And let's do the same thing for 14 and 16 and 18 and 20 hours. So now we have a line where anywhere along this line, no matter what date it is, you can say, go up to this line here, and you know that if the time of day corresponds to this time and it's this time of the year, no, 14 hours of right ascension is going to be exactly due south. So now, I can get those out of the way and put numbers like that on it. So that's where the chart and that's where the slanted lines come from. Now, since I don't have a preview of what my next slide is, I'm just going to advance it and then see what it is and ad lib it from there. All right. Yes, okay. What I've done here is I've shown you the major constellations you can find at each of those right ascensions. So 0 hours, Andromeda and Pisces are the two constellations that are sort of in that general part of the sky. At 2 hours, it's Aries and Cetus. And you can see, for example, Orion is at 6 hours, Gemini, Cancer, and Canis Major at 8, Leo's at 10, the Virgo cluster is at 12, Boötis is at 14, and so on. And Dave's already mentioned the summer triangle, which was coincident that I had the summer triangle marked in there as it's around 20. And the key thing about the summer triangle is it's sort of 19 to 20. I want you to remember that, okay? The summer triangle has a right ascension of around 19 to 20, as we're going to come back to that. All right. So now we've got the table. We know what the dates across the bottom are for. We know what the local mean time going down the left-hand side is for. We know what the diagonal lines tell us. What do the weird curved lines tell you? Well, the lines are there to tell you when it actually gets dark enough to do astronomy. And one of the first things you might notice about this diagram is that the diagram is not symmetric about the center of that chart. It's symmetric about a line running right down through here, right there, June 21st. That's the day of the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. That is the symmetry about which things tend to revolve. Now, if you live at the equator, anybody who lived at the equator or visited fairly down south knows that it doesn't really matter what time of the year it is down there. The sun goes down at 6 o'clock, it goes more or less straight down, and it's dark by about 7 o'clock. So these red lines, which aren't included in this diagram, tells you that if you want to observe in March or April or July or any time of the year, if you're near the equator, around 7 o'clock, by just going down here, that line tells you, okay, at 7 o'clock, it's now dark enough, it's astronomical twilight. There's no longer any hint of sunlight in the western sky. You can do astronomy, and you do it from here all the way through until 5 o'clock, which is an hour before the sun comes up, because the sun sets at 6, the sun comes up at 6 local time, 2 straight lines. As you start to move away from the Earth's equator, things get a little bit more complicated. So you notice that this line here is labeled 20 degrees. So this is 20 degrees north latitude. And you can see that in the summertime, you've got to wait a little bit longer until the sun is completely below the horizon. Not a lot, about an hour longer, but still, it's good to know that if you plan on doing astronomy down there. And you'll notice if you go all the way down through, it's nice and dark, nice and dark, nice and dark in June until down here, in which case, again, you're going to lose your observing opportunity about an hour earlier than you would if you were on the equator, but it's not that big a deal. And you get to make up for it because you're now far enough away from the equator that the seasons start to go into play. And if you follow this line for 20, it's the lowest one over here, and you can see that it's just a little bit above. So over here in January, or in December, and again, you'll notice that the symmetry is around December 21st, around here. There's the line for 20 degrees north. So you can see you're a little bit further north, and now in the wintertime, you get a little bit more observing than you would if you're at the tropics. Now, what if you're in Halifax? Halifax is at 45. So I'm going to move the red line down to 45 degrees. And as you can see, it's now starting to get quite pinched around this time of the year. So you have to wait quite a long time until it gets totally dark. And then you don't get a really long time before the sun starts to come back up again, which is why we don't get to do a lot of astronomy in June. But in the wintertime now, we get even more in December. We get to go from there all the way down to here now in the wintertime. And as Dave pointed out, and set me up perfectly for this, you'll see that as soon as you get to 50 degrees north, which is only 5 degrees of latitude higher than we are, from the 1st of June until the middle of July, symmetric about the solstice, as you come down, it never gets dark, at least not astronomically dark. And the further north you get, the worse the situation gets. So if you're at 60 degrees north latitude, you basically have no useful observing at all if you need a perfectly dark sky from around the middle of April until around the end of August. And as Dave pointed out, if you live in Edmonton, or if you live in one of the cities that's further north, you're basically screwed for astronomy this time of the year, unless you want to look at the moon and the planets. Or unless a really, really bright comet comes along, then you might be okay. So that's what the curved lines are for on this diagram. Now, as I mentioned, this section of the handbook is done by Randall Brooks. And this is the version of the diagram that I inherited when I took over as editor of the handbook. And a couple of years after I was editor of the Observer's Handbook, Randall wanted to make some changes to it. And I said, okay, what do you want to change? He told me what he wanted to change. And I started thinking about it. And this was the first time it actually really made me look at what this diagram was all about. So we know that what this lets you do is, if it's a time when you can actually do observing, you can look up the date and look up the time of day over here. And this will tell you 16, 17, 18, it will tell you which constellations are going to be high in the south. But notice something really interesting. If you're at 45 degrees, notice that in the springtime, this line runs at almost a 90-degree angle to these lines of right ascension. And in the fall, it's almost parallel to them. And it was when I was looking at this diagram, thinking, oh, I didn't ever notice that before with this diagram, because I never really looked at the diagram before. And I thought, well, what does that actually imply? Well, what it means is that from the 1st of March until just before the solstice, over the course of those 3 months, we go through 10 hours of what right ascension is due south. That is why the spring constellations zip by so fast in the evening sky. If you're at the equator, it doesn't matter. Each hour gets about 1 month when it's in prime viewing. But look what happens in the fall. In the fall, from here to here, you only go through 3 hours. It slows down the apparent motion of the celestial sphere at twilight. And look at that. 19 hours and 20 hours are right there as soon as it gets nice and dark. Which is why the summer triangle, I often joke with people in the planetarium, say, in fact, if you actually follow the 20-hour line, it takes you, it's not that far from here, that even in November, if you're doing a planetarium show in November, you can still point out the summer triangle because it's still in the sky. And this is why. It's because these lines aren't at the same angle to these lines all year long. Now, similarly, for those of you who get up in the really, really early morning, which is not me, you'll also notice the same sort of thing. In the twilight sky, we have the opposite. So in this, if you look at the springtime sky, you're only going to go through about 3 hours of right ascension in the twilight sky. And again, they're around 18, 19, 20 hours. So all springtime, as if you get up just before dark, you're going to see the summer triangle. Whereas over here, if you get up just before it starts to get light in the morning, they zip right by in the wintertime. So that was the part that I never really noticed before until I actually had to rework this diagram with Randall's help. So what exactly was it that Randall wanted to fiddle with this, that brought about this epiphany for me? Well, I mentioned that if you're at the equator or near to the equator, say within 10 degrees of the equator, this thing works because it goes from the equator up to degrees north, which means if you live on this part of the Earth, the handbook is fine. The problem is, if you live on this part of the Earth, you're screwed because it only looks at what happens in the sky for people in the Northern Hemisphere. So if you're in most of South America, most of South Africa, anywhere in Australia or New Zealand, or maybe if you're actually doing observing from down in Antarctica, that part of the handbook isn't any good. And what Randall had wanted to do is he had wanted to actually make it useful for people on both hemispheres. So this is what he did. It's still done based around the actual solstice, except in the Southern Hemisphere, the months are off by 6 months. So here's our Northern Hemisphere months going from January through to December. In the Southern Hemisphere, they go from July to December around to June. So that part changes if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. The other part that changes is because the Earth's on the opposite side of the sun when you have the summer solstice, the hour of right ascension that you see has to be 12 hours away from what it is when we have the same event in the Northern Hemisphere. So in the middle of the summertime, in the Southern Hemisphere, instead of 18 hours being what you see at dark facing south, it's 6 hours. And every single one of these you will discover is off by 12 hours from the northern ones. So I really should thank Randall Brooks for bringing this diagram to my attention, because I had not been aware of exactly why the summer triangle had always lasted so long into the fall, whereas if you're trying to see the spring constellations, you basically get like 1 month and they're gone. So that's what that page of the handbook is all about. So if there's any questions, I will stop sharing now.
One comment, cool. Okay, well, I don't see any questions having come up, so thanks so much for that, Pat.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
And I'm glad it could be a moment of discovery for you as well.
Yes, well, you never know what you're going to find when you open up the handbook and look at it. As Roy always says, it's a really information-dense book. And sometimes at first glance, it looks like it's so dense, it's like either something really simple and they've just made it more complicated, or it really is some dense information you have to spend some time looking at to actually get information out of it.
Yeah.
And for that page, it was Randall Brooks that actually made me do it for that particular part of the handbook.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you so much for that. And I have an apology to make to the member who asked me if I was going to address the SCO stuff. And I think what he really wanted me to address is the fact that Hallelujah, SCO is open. There was an announcement that went out, I believe on June the 5th or 6th or somewhere around there, that as of June 5th, members can now go back to SCO with some restrictions because of the COVID situation still. The guidelines regarding the use of the St. Croix Observatory are certainly on our website. So under observing, and I think there's a link from the front page. There are some requireds and there are some recommendeds as well, but the required is that, in summary, no more than 10 people at any one time can be at the site. Members have to announce ahead of time the fact that they are going through, and they announce that through the discussion list. So if you're not a member of the discussion list and you want to use SCO, we strongly advise that you become that member. And if you don't know how, certainly contact me, or any member, and they'll be able to advise you how to do that. If the roll-off has to be used, for instance, if you're going to be using the 16-inch, or in order to, because there are 3 pads plus the roll-off, only 2 people can go into the roll-off at any one time. Cleaning must be done on all surfaces that you touch. I don't care if it's a doorknob, a light switch, whatever you touch has to be cleaned after your use. And there's a whole bunch of other things there. And basically garbage in, garbage out. In other words, bring a garbage bag with you so that you can throw away all your paper towels that you use, your disinfectant materials, food wrappers, whatever else you have to bring. Garbage in, garbage out. So please read the guidelines for it. It is on our site. And please be mindful that we're still in a situation where it isn't completely safe for everyone to attend at any given time, but at least we can have up to 10 folk up there at one time. So that's a really big step forward. So having said that, Paul Heath, you are up next, and I believe you have some colorful orbs that you would like to show us.
Yes. Did my slides come through?
No, they did not. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I can resend those. Okay. Oh, it's on the no reply Zoom. I have to go. Oh, sorry. Give me just a second here, and I'll.
Okay, while he's doing that, can everyone see Paul?
Okay, I sent them again. I had them on the no reply Zoom that I sent to you. That's why they didn't go through. So I sent them again. unfortunately, I have no connection to my laptop, my hard drive, or my main tower, so I couldn't put them on because I just finished them on the laptop. Anyway, most of you know that I do solar system walk, and the models I use for most of my outreach. And let me know when the first slide comes in, the one from Nova East there. Now, for the models, basically, you can see this. It's a styrofoam ball. And what I have done is taken photographs from NASA from all the different orbiters, Messenger and Voyager and the Mars probes and the Earth satellites and that, and tried to do as accurate a drawing. So if you rotate, this is Mercury, all the different features that were noticed on Messenger. So I tried to make it as accurate as possible. And the styrofoam balls, basically you get in any craft store. The trick is to get the scales, and that's what my model does. I start with an Earth that's about 1 7/8 inches, I believe. Yeah, 1 5/8 inches in diameter, just under 2 inches. That's a common styrofoam ball that you can get. And then I scaled the models based on the handbook's diameter of all the planets. So all my models are scaled to the same size if Earth is this size. So hopefully that slide will come through soon. Some of you have been in Nova East and seen the model of the sun that I had. At this scale, if the Earth is this size, at 1 5/8 inch diameter, the sun will be 7 feet 2 inches across. And I have a styrofoam, those noodles for the pool. I made a sun, and so I can show the scale of the planets to the star. But basically, what you want to do is take your styrofoam balls to the size. I have a chart here on once my email goes through to Judy, will show you how big the styrofoam ball needs to be. Now, in the case of Mercury here, I had to take one of the sizes that I use for Earth and sand it down. Now, you use a very fine sandpaper, and you just keep sanding it in like rolling the ball over the sandpaper. And it takes a while, but you can shrink it down to the size you need to match the proper scale, so that Earth and Mercury are to scale to each other, so that the two styrofoam balls are to scale. You can see that the Earth is slightly larger than Mercury, and then once you have all the size, then the painting. Now, Venus, of course, is very, very similar in size to Earth. I just did a little bit of sanding on Venus because it's just slightly smaller. But then the painting is, since there's no features very much, that was one of the Werner probes photographs that I used to paint Venus. So using the NASA images, I painted all the way around. And with Mars, there was smaller styrofoam balls, but again, I had to shrink that down a little bit, so sanded that. And then I used the latest images of Mars to paint the features on Mars. So you can see that Mars is definitely smaller than Earth. Hopefully this is showing up for you. Okay. Now, when we get to the asteroids, they would be pinheads. So basically, I made them large enough. This is Ceres, which is now a dwarf planet, and Vesta. Now, Vesta is sort of squished. So I took one for Ceres, like this, one of the smallest ones, and I squeezed them until it shrunk and smoothed out and sanded it. And then I changed the shape of of it so I can get the squished in appearance of Vesta. And then again, I used the probe that I think it was Dawn that went to Vesta and Sears, and I actually painted them based on the images from the probe. So the asteroids have had to be made larger than they actually appear to this scale, because you need a microscope to be able to see them at this scale otherwise. But there again, it just take a little bit of time with your styrofoam balls, sand them down and round them off and shape them, especially with like Vesta and asteroids, shape them the best you can, and then paint them based on the NASA images. Now, of course, when we get to Jupiter, the largest styrofoam ball I could find in the craft store is this. Jupiter is actually 4.5 inches wider than this. So this one is, let's see. Oh, just that. This is actually 5 3/4 of an inch across, and it should be 9.5 inches across. But those styrofoam balls of that size are prohibitively expensive. So what I just did is I bought the largest one I could at the craft store, and the second largest one I used for Saturn. And you can see I've got the great red spot here. It's a little different shape now, but I tried to be as accurate as possible in my in the paintings. And then when we go to Saturn, Saturn of course has other features. The styrofoam ball itself is a little smaller than Jupiter's, but you notice I paint even on the pole. I painted what the probes have shown, a six-sided pole. We're not really sure what causes that to be like that, but I tried to be as accurate as I could. And then the rings, I just took the largest piece of flat foam I could find. So again, the rings should be that Jupiter or Saturn should be another 3 inches across, but the rings should actually extend out probably about 3 times what the width of this ring is. But I couldn't find a sufficient size piece of foam, thin foam, to show the scale. But I think this does fairly well. I have the Cassini division marked in here. And you use hors d'oeuvre sticks, I don't know if you can see them here, to hold the foam in place around the equator of Saturn. So you notice it's on a bit of an angle, but it's fairly easy to cut out. And one thing we know is that the rings actually, the full diameter of the rings would stretch between the Earth and the Moon, about 384,000 kilometers in radius. So, but again, a simple styrofoam ball painted, and as large a thin foam as you could get. You notice it's just a very thin foam, and work from there. It takes a little time, but it's something fairly easy to do. Now they do have balls. I was really amazed that I found a styrofoam ball exactly the correct size for my scaled model for both Uranus and Neptune. So again, Uranus is not really much features because we're actually looking at Uranus this way. It's tipped on its side almost 93 degrees ahead. So we're actually looking at the top. So we don't see much features. The cloud features I'm showing are from the Voyager probe, from the images of the Voyager probe. And then we have Neptune. Now Neptune's the same way. I found a ball that was almost the size, and what I did is I compressed it. I squeezed it down because it was only, I think, a half a centimeter too big. So I rolled it, pushed it down, rolling it on a table until it squished enough that it took a couple of days to do that, to get it to stay in the side, and then of course I painted it to the right based on the Voyager images. Now Pluto, I had to make larger because it very I had a Pluto to scale. You notice that it's fairly big compared to Earth, but the one I did have to scale, one of our participants at Nova East the other year thought it was a popsicle and ate it. So when I had to remake my models, I made them a little bigger just so I could get some detail, since the New Horizons gave us the chance to actually see, I don't know if you can make out the heart on Pluto there. And then I put Charon attached so that it will no longer fit in a child's mouth. Because if we can get the pictures, if you get, did you get the emails yet? No, I don't know why they're not going through. Anyway, some of you have seen the picture of Earth that was eaten. I had two big bite marks in my old model of the planet. So Earth got bitten. So I put Pluto and Charon together so that they would know that it's a dual planetary system, because you notice I have a black line where the center of the orbit is. They both rotate around this center of mass, which is outside of Pluto. So it's not a moon and a planet, it's actually a dual dwarf planetary system. So, but again, styrofoam balls molded as close to size. Again, I had to use with Charon, I had to sand that down. And then I used the images from New Horizons to paint it as accurate as possible. The one thing about this scale model is that it also goes to the fact that at this scale, one pace is like a large stride is 150 million kilometers. So you can actually use these models for the solar system to pace out the whole solar system and do a walk of the solar system. And that's what I'll be showing for my Nova East presentation. But it takes time. And if you don't like the smell of paint, do it outside. Because what I did do though is all of them, you see they're shiny. I've got a Barethane coat, 2 coats on it to allow them to be outside so they can be waterproof in the rain and the dew, etc. So they can be used fairly well. So it's not that hard to do. It takes time, but we have now satellites that have taken images of all the planets. Mars is coming up. I don't know if we'll see this kind of detail. These are from the images from 2003 at the closest approach. So there's a lot more detail on the image. So I'm hoping that we can see a fair bit of image this summer on Mars. But you can always build your own solar system. So, is there any questions? And, for anyone with students out there, any young children, I do not loan mine for their school projects. They have to make their own.
Thanks, Paul. Keegan just noted that one of the neat facts about the rings of Saturn is that they're the flattest things we know of in the universe.
Yeah.
Galen Thurber said, dwarf scale, well done. Keep them safe and away from golfers.
Well, one thing about the rings, according to the scale that I have for the models, this should be a piece of paper. This is too thick. This foam is actually too thick for proper scale. So, but paper doesn't stay too floppy. So, but
and 2 people have asked, in essence, at that scale, how many paces to Pluto's orbit, or to display the whole solar system?
Well, 40 astronomical units roughly. 1 AU is to Earth. That's 10 paces. So 40,000 paces is what we go down in Smiley's. We go down to almost the campgrounds near where the wood store is. So it's just about a mile, actually just under 1.5 kilometers, I believe. But the best thing about it with my son, I wish the slide had come through, the 7-foot diameter of the sun, as we're moving across the field, actually looks smaller by the time we get to Jupiter. So we can actually see with this scaled model, you can see how the sun would look as you get farther and farther away from Earth. So it's not super accurate, but it's a good demonstration, and it really allows people to grasp both size and dimension. And if you take your time and be a pretty good artist, you can find yourself on your planet.
And another question is, have you ever taken an image from a drone of the solar system?
From a drone?
Yeah, so now you're taking a top-down sort of view from what you've laid out in the field.
I've never thought of that, but that might be, we've got a couple members that have drones. We might look at that for part of the presentation this summer. I'm going to try to do a walkthrough, a physical walkthrough, and talk about each of the planets, because there's features on each of the planets that you can talk about with a model in your hand. So it's a good mix of data and fun. You need a good pair of shoes, though.
Yeah. So I think what we'll do, Paul, is with the slides that I didn't get, or the photos I didn't get, we'll try and get those, and we'll post them on the outreach website, or outreach section of our website. We'll let people know. And that way, if anybody attending wants to know that information that's on your slides, they can have access to it.
Yeah, I have the slide with each planet with the data, with their diameters and the scale of the model itself, both in inches and centimeters.
Wonderful.
So
Yeah, because there have been a few comments.
Yeah.
Certainly one panelist said, I love this. I would like them spread out on my lawn. And then she says, oops, lawn not big enough. So
well, Jupiter is just the size of a football field. So that gives you an idea of the scale of the solar system here. When we walk out, we would be 100 meters from the sun at Jupiter. And that's most football fields, most schoolyards.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Paul. And so this gives people from now until your talk on September 1st to actually build their own models so that they can do this with you as you present it.
Walk out. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that. Okay. Next on our agenda is Tim Doucette, our guest speaker. Now, Tim has graciously decided to do a second mini presentation, if you will, for us. Given Paul was unable to attend this afternoon's session and was to do a photo montage, Tim has agreed to do a mini session, if you will, of photos that he has taken and is working on. So I thank you, Tim, for that. For folks that don't know Tim, he resides down the southwest portion of our province and is the owner-operator of a place called Deep Sky Observatory, in which he offers sessions in the evening sky, as well as lodgings for those that want to have a night or two longer at his location. I'm going to leave the introductions as that, because I'm sure Tim will want to extend the description of himself as to how he got to where he is, and give his presentation on Cap the Light, Save the Night. So Tim, I give it to you to do your photos as well as your special presentation. And thank you so much for coming to our session.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a great pleasure to be able to speak to everybody and go ahead and enjoy this virtually, I guess, because with all this stuff that's been happening, there sure has been a lot of changes. So, all right. So let me know if you can see my screen. I will do the introduction afterwards. The observatory that I own and operate is in Southwest Nova, and we'll go into some details about it, but for now I'll just show you some of the images that I've been working on with some of the equipment that I'm working with now. So here's a photo of, on the left side you can see it's a Canon 60D camera, and I use a Sky Tracker Pro. Sorry, no, this is the original one that I have. It's an Ioptron, just a sky tracker, and I use it in a different way. I like to do time-lapse photography while my big imaging scope is working. So this system, what I do is I actually don't use it to take pictures of and track the rotation of the Earth for for long exposure photography that way. Instead, I mount it horizontally and let it spin through the night so that I can track sunrise to sunset. And it makes for some awesome time-lapse shots, time lapses and that sort of thing. The observatory that I have a 14-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope, and I recently acquired they call it, you guys may have heard of this, I'm sure, before, for you astronomers. It's a hyperstar lens, and basically you remove the lens you remove the secondary mirror of your telescope, you put this lens, and then you attach your camera. So my 14-inch telescope is now turned into a 680 millimeter f1.9 lens, which is incredibly fast for those of you that know photography. On the right-hand side towards the top there, you can see that there is inside of the observatory, and I'm just going to try to move I can't seem to move my icons out of the way. Okay, there we go. So yeah, you can see a picture of the inside of the observatory from a camera sitting on the floor pointing up. And I've recently been working on a project with Dave Lane, and we're trying to automate this observatory and put it on the social media, very similar to exactly what he's been doing with the observatory at St. Mary's and his own personal observatory, and now a new little mini observatory that he has as well. So eventually this will be sort of online so that people can request images from the telescope, you know, as the night goes on. So here are some of the pictures. Now, keep in mind, these images are actually taken, they're only 30-second exposures, usually a stack of about between 10 and 50 exposures. The detail is actually quite impressive. These are some of the galaxies that you've seen before, M66. And so here's another one, the Pinwheel Galaxy. Again, 30-second exposure, there's about 50, actually there's 30 exposures in this one. So the data that can be retrieved is very fast. You can capture images very quickly. And for our skies here, I find this is the best solution to get really good astronomical images. So in the run of a night, I was testing my system not long ago, a few weeks ago, and I ran all night, programmed the whole telescope just to take a bunch of images. I was able to get about 600 images captured that night of these, 5 or 6 targets. And again, anywhere between 10 and 30-second exposures. So for us down here in Southwest Nova, well, mostly of Nova Scotia, you may have some clear, images or your clear skies part of the night, but part of the night it might cloud over. Especially here in my area in the mornings, we find we get a lot of mist. So usually by 4 o'clock in the morning, we're done. So that's what, especially in the summertime. The winter time is a different story. Here's an image of an M61, a Galaxy M61, a supernova 2020 JFO that was discovered not long ago, only probably maybe a month ago, 2 months maybe now. So it's an exploding star and that appeared. So we were able to see that. My favorite galaxy, the Whirlpool Galaxy. Of course, that's one of the first, one of my first images, I guess, with this new system. The camera I use is I used to use a QHY10. Now I'm using a ZWO 2600 MC Pro. And what's the advantage of changing cameras is that this camera, of course, has very low read noise. So about, a read noise of 1, which is insane. My old camera was a read noise of like 15. So the images are very clean. And the pixel size is very small. So I think it's 3.7 microns pixels, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a one-shot color. So we get some really nice color, and it's a cooled camera. This is a big project that I'm actually working on this summer, the Veil Nebula. This is a single panel. Actually, it's a screenshot of one of the panels. using a filter, oxygen 3 and hydrogen alpha filter during the full moon. I took a picture of this galaxy, of this nebula. It's a supernova remnant. I took a 6-panel mosaic. Now, this is one of the panels. It's not all of the panels. So I'm trying to capture that whole Veil Nebula complex in one pattern to make one giant image. Right now, my image size, as far as pixel size, is approaching about 150 megapixels. So it's getting huge. So I'll be continuing to add more data to it. And again, these are only 30-second exposures, so we can capture some really great images in a very short time. And here's the Western Veil. And these are not, I actually haven't finished processing these at all. I use PixInsight, and the only thing I did to this photo actually is I stacked 50 images, and I removed the background, and that's all I've done to this image. So that's it for my little photo demonstration. If you have any questions, fire them away. I can't quite see my screen. If there are questions, maybe you could just go ahead and ask.
So far, there aren't any, Tim.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we'll start on with the main presentation that I have for you guys tonight, or today, I should say, this afternoon. It's called Cap the Light, Save the Night. And yeah, so a few things for you today. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. We'll talk about what light pollution is. In order to understand what light pollution is, we need to understand what light is. And, why should you care? And, what can you really do to really, help out with this endeavor? So myself, my name's Tim, as you know now, and I own the Deep Sky Observatory in Southwest Nova. And I was born and raised in Quinnan, Nova Scotia, and which is in this part about 30 minutes from Yarmouth. And I was born totally blind and recovered about 10% of my eyesight. I had congenital cataracts, and I discovered when I was about 35 that I have the ability to see in ultraviolet light. So that kind of gave me a boost as far as being able to, enjoy the night sky. And that's where I really started to take off with astronomy and, in creating something very special for people. Our region in 2014 was designated as the first starlight tourist destination in North America. So our observatory, we do night sky experiences with people from outside, people from everywhere around the world. They come to our place and experience the night sky like they've never have before. We've recently opened up sky bubble tents in a cottage for rent. Sky bubble tents are basically a clear vinyl blow up kind of dome where you can see the night sky all night without any obstruction, as you can see in this little time lapse. There's no wires or anything in the way. And it's amazing, actually. People that come, we've never had a negative comment. People are always blown away. And, we're hoping that this year, unfortunately, we cannot offer the sky bubble tents because of the material they're made of. We can't clean them properly with the COVID-19 pandemic, but we will be offering them next year. So, questions to ask yourself about light. So that's about me. Let's start moving on to the main topic of the day. Questions to ask yourself. So why do you need light at night? Where do you need it? When do you need your light? And how much do you really need? So those are the questions to kind of think in the back of your mind if you're ever putting lights up. So what is light pollution? Well, think about this. For the last million years or so, where humans of some sort walk the earth, the sky's always been dark at night. It's something that is inherited to our planet, and it's only been in the last 100 years or so where we've lit up the night sky, and with the invention of the light bulb. Essentially, light pollution is light that's shines where it's really not needed or wanted, whether it's up in the sky, whether it's across the road, across to your neighbor's house. all this thing with light. Light is energy. We put energy and money into light, and millions of dollars is wasted, essentially thrown into space or thrown in places where it doesn't need, doesn't need to be. One of the main types of light is light trespass. Light trespass is essentially, light that spills onto your, another yard or shines into your backyard that's not yours. And it is a bit of a challenge to control. Not impossible. It just does take some time to figure out proper, designs of how to do light. Glare is one of the things that is most people notice right away. And there's sort of different levels of glare. That's when you can actually see the bulb of a light that's shining. Discomfort glare is like sort of just, oh, I noticed it there, and I look away from it, and yeah, I can still see around. It's just a little bit of annoying, I guess. Disability glare is when a light will shine you in the eyes. So let's say you're walking at night or something, and a car zips by, and it has its lights on bright. For a few seconds, you actually can't really see, or it leaves kind of like you can't really see what's in front of you for a couple of seconds. A blinding glare would be more of the sense of a light that shines and then you actually can't see anything for several seconds. You're like totally like a spot is left in your eye and you're like, holy, I can't see a thing. So that's kind of like what we talk about, as far as glare goes. Sky glow, as far as astronomers go, is mostly a man-made source. It's, lights that are shining up in the sky, and it makes it really impossible to see the sky after a while if there's too many of them. So it's light that's shining upwards into the sky that's reflecting off of dust particles, water particles, anything like that. And it just basically reflects back down and scatters so you can see everywhere in the sky where all this stuff is. And that's what really blocks a lot of the starlight from getting down to us when we're in the city. I took some pictures when I moved to Quinnen. So I was away from Quinnen for, I guess, 25 years or more. And then I moved back to Quinnen in 2014. And I started taking photographs. Of course, I always did take photographs every year that I went. But this time I tried to keep, and I kind of realized what the light pollution was starting to be like. And I'll tell you why, how this all came about in a little bit. But I took pictures, and as you can see, from 2014 to 2015, actually, to 2018, you notice a little bit more sky glow happening, and it's actually a slightly different color. It's slightly get a little bit more white. Actually, in April 14th of this year, you can see it's pretty much almost completely gone. And why the reason for that is in 2016, I was approached by this is the town of Yarmouth sky glow that you're seeing there. These are about 30-second exposures at ISO 3200, I believe. So what's happening is in 2016, the town of Yarmouth approached me and said, hey, we hear you're doing, light pollution and all this, light pollution abatement, and we'd like to know what kind of lights we should use. So I actually did send them lighting documentation, but unfortunately it didn't get in time for the final decision by council to be made. So they ended up using an LED light that's around 5,000 Kelvin, which was kind of the standard back in 2016. But they were under mandate to change their lights, and that's what happened. So as you can see in 2020, now the light is more white because of the new LEDs. And now it's going to be switched. We'll eventually be approaching again. We have been in the past, but to try to retrofit those lights so that they're more of a full cutoff fixture, and they're not as bright and the whole bit. So we'll talk about that too. Another kind of thing to know about light pollution is light clutter, where you have like grouping of lights that's like so bad that it's confusing. You not sure where to go. And of course, a lot of the cities are like this. If you've ever been to Las Vegas or even Toronto or that kind of thing, there's some places where it's very, very cluttered and there's a lot of light pollution happening there. This contributes really to sky glow and glare and the whole bit. as well. So I like to use this picture. I found this very interesting. So in Los Angeles, from Mount Wilson Observatory back in 1908. So this is a 1 hour exposure, of course, on a film camera, I'm assuming. Didn't have digital back then. Or so a 1 hour exposure reveals, you know, a few lights here and there. And the following image that I'm going to show you is now, I'm going to guess about a 30-second exposure, not quite even. I would say even maybe a 10 or 15 from the same location in 2006 from Wilson Observatory. So as you can see, the light pollution has grown significantly over the last 100 years. Our region here, so here's a map showing where we are. The X there on the left shows where Quinnen is. The brighter spots are the light pollution, Yarmouth on the left. Here you can see our region, here Southwest Nova. And there's a spot here that we've actually reduced this light pollution significantly, and I'm trying to get a good image of it. This is back 2016. And since then, this area here is actually the light pollution has reduced. So it was actually a lot of the cause was actually a car dealership. So we've talked with them and they've changed over their lights, and it was really good. They got a lot of publicity out of it, and we're hoping eventually other car dealerships and stuff will follow suit. So let's talk about understanding light. You know, what is light? Well, the main components of light that we like to talk about are the brightness. And we talk about the brightness, and we talk about the amount of energy used. So a watt is the amount of energy that's used, or the amount of electricity used, and a lumen is its brightness. So it's how much amount of light that's produced per one candlelight. So if a light is 1 lumen, essentially it's, you know, as bright as like one little candle. We used to be able to use wattage when we were talking about light bulbs, and you'd say, I'm going to go get a 50-watt light or a 20-watt light. But the problem is now all these different lights are using different amount of energy and are becoming way more efficient. So if we look at this as kind of a brightness of lumens, you know, if you went to the store, you know, 10 years ago and said, hey, I need a 100-watt light bulb. Well, that's equivalent to about 1,300 lumens or so. Nowadays, if you went and said, yeah, I'm going to go get I need a 100-watt LED light, you'd be very surprised because the amount of lumens that would be spit out would be way brighter than you think. For example, I think the lowest that Nova Scotia Power sells their lights is a 45-watt LED. And it's stunningly bright. It's overkill. They could actually drop that down to easily a 20-watt and still get the same effect without having so much brightness. The other part of the light that we talk about is color. Color has a very, light has a color, whether it's, you know, red, green, blue, yellow, black. So, not black. You can have a black light, but that's more of a ultraviolet sort of light. So when we talk about lighting, we like to stick with lights for outdoors that are about 2,700 Kelvin. So it's sort of color temperature that we're talking about. Looking at candlelight and tungsten lights are basically sort of, and even the incandescent lights, they're about 3,000, you know, Kelvin or less. So when you go to a store and you're looking to try to figure out, hey, I need a light, you know, do I care, you know, what the color is? The color actually makes quite a bit of a difference for outdoors. We call anything that's sort of above the 3,000 mark, it's called a bioactive light. And that means essentially that, you know, blue light sort of has an effect on the environment and yourself. It tends to essentially wake us up. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. The other thing is the shielding. The shielding of the light's really important. And to me, this is kind of one of the most important ones as far as reducing sky glow. So you want to try to get a light that has a full cutoff shield to it. Anything light that's sort of shining upward is basically you're wasting energy. If you can direct that light where you want it, you're going to end up, lighting your path way better. So it's kind of the thought of where do you need the light? So lighting up your pathway as opposed to lighting up the sky and the surrounding area that really doesn't have an effect on, what you need. So when do you need light? Well, figure that out as, try to put your lights on a motion sensor or a timer. It's a great security feature. Instead of having a light on all night, that can actually attract criminals and, that sort of thing if you're afraid of the dark. It's best to have a light that's on a timer. They're cheap, they're 20, 30 bucks maybe, and they'll alert you if something goes by. So few of the myths that I like to debunk a little bit. People tend to think that more light equals better security. Well, looking at it in a couple of different ways, that's really not true. And I'll show you some examples. So see this guy here, he's walking along the path. You can see him, this is super bright light. There's actually a bunch of them. You can see him, but there's some sharp shadows. Can you still see him? If you were walking, very unlikely that you actually see him hiding in the shadows there. So it's all about the lighting design and trying to avoid these harsh shadows. People seem to think that more light is better security. Well, not always true. Another one, so essentially it's better light is equal to better security. That's sort of the right statement to make. Here's another example. So how we can show that you can improve the quality of the light. So for example, just to the right-hand side, you can see there's some fairly sharp shadows there. There's just a bright light shining everywhere. Retrofitting this light, you can improve the lighting quality incredibly, much better, much better for the environment and the whole bit. Just takes a little bit of thought. They're saying, oh, we need more light, it improves visibility. Well, again, not necessarily. Here you have, there's a gentleman hiding in the shadows in the fence area. And it reminds me exactly of our place in Moncton where we had a light on the side of the house, but you couldn't see in the backyard. And you could never tell if anybody was there. And eventually we switched out lights and stuff, but I almost think that's our house in Moncton, but it's not. And you can see the glare there. So why should you care about all this? Like why, is it just to see the stars? Well, not really. Essentially, exposure to blue light at night for humans is not helpful. In fact, it's harmful. Blue light sort of reduces the production of melatonin that actually helps you sleep at night. Have you ever noticed when you have a beautiful sunny day in the summer and, if you've got lots of energy, you want to do things? Let me tell you, try a week in the fog in Yarmouth or in Halifax. You probably know what I mean. Not as fun. You tend to be like, sluggish. And that's one of the reasons you don't get as much blue light. Your body's trying to eventually kind of put you to sleep. If you go to sleep at night, it's counterproductive to have your phone with you, your iPad, unless it has a blue light filter that will help you sleep, help you fall asleep. My wife had a similar situation where she was having insomnia. We had just bought her an iPad several years ago, and she used to read at night, and she used to fall right asleep, just read with a regular book. And then when she switched to an iPad, she was noticing she couldn't sleep, and it was over several months. And it turned out that was the cause once we figured it out. So it's actually kind of interesting. Sleep disorders, are resulting of having a weakened immune system from not getting sleep, being susceptible to various forms of cancer. It has a huge role to play. The other reason is animals. Lots of nocturnal animals really require darkness in order to survive. Not just to survive, but to reproduce, to hunt. It's a huge problem that the world is slowly starting to realize. And just a list of some of the species that are in danger of plants and animals, bats, fireflies, deer. It's actually funny because one of the stories that I was talking with a friend of mine, and he lives not far from up the road from us, and he has foxes. He has a fox farm, and he raised minks and fox and everything. One year, he had hardly any reproduction going on at all. There was no babies that were born. He couldn't figure out what was going on until he realized just across the street from him, there's a river, and there's a pathway right to the river where the fire truck would go and fill up for water. And well, there used to be a sodium light there, which was a non sort of blue light, more of an amber color. And what happened was they replaced the light with a super bright LED light, which essentially made it like daytime. So they were actually getting confused and they wouldn't reproduce. So it was kind of an interesting story to hear him tell me about that after I, mentioned to him about light pollution. And that was even sort of before I kind of really got involved in it. As far as plants go, light pollution will can reduce the tree life by 20%, but basically it confuses them. It confuses them as far as, when they should lose their leaves and when they should, you see here a street light, and you can see that normally the tree would have lost all its leaves, but it still thinks it's in the summertime, so they're late falling in the fall. Migratory birds is a big one. Here's a tribute to light from in New York, and here's a little video. I'm not sure if you can see it. These are migratory birds, and they get caught in the light, essentially fly until they're exhausted and they fall down, they fall to their death. They realized that they couldn't keep these lights on all the time, so they've had to basically turn them on at certain points and turn it off at certain points to let the birds escape the light. Here's a shot of Rideau Ferry in Ontario, and white light essentially increases algae growth as well. This is one of the lakes there that apparently has, its ecosystem has been ruined because they put LED lights along the shoreline that contributed, it's not the only reason, but it contributed heavily to algae growth. You can see where all the algae is growing next to the lights. Of course, astronomy, learning about the night sky. Here's an example from Toronto back in 2003 when there was a major blackout on the eastern seaboard, and the before and after shots. There's even phone calls to 911 during that night. People wondering, hey, we see something in the sky. We don't know what it is. Could be like aliens. We don't know. It could be a fire. And it turned out they were looking at the Milky Way, something that never seen before. In fact, about 60% of people that visit the observatory have never seen the Milky Way. The human connection to nature, basically they say that we're all stardust. In the end, exploding stars dropped, and comets dropped, pieces of material that, basically created us essentially, or contributed to creating us, I guess, gave the building blocks of life. And so we're all connected, to being able to witness, the stars and, the things that are happening in the sky. And, if we continue to light pollute, we won't be able to see that anymore. So back in 2014, when I moved to Quinnen, the Starlight Foundation is a group basically from the Canary Islands, founded by the Astrophysics Institute. They created the Starlight Foundation, and their mandate is to protect the night sky, very similar to what RASC does, and the same as what the International Dark Sky Association. These guys are funded by UNESCO, the International Astronomical Union, the World Tourism Association. And one of their mandates, of course, is to protect the night sky. Our region, in order to be certified, you have to go through a very lengthy process, and to have a Starlight tourist destination or one of the other different certifications. But in 2014, after working with the auditors, we became the first in North America and the fourth in the world to have two designations, Starlight Tourist Destination and Starlight Reserve, and named the Acadian Skies and Mi'kmaq Lands. And what does this mean for us? Well, it's unique to North America. It's bringing a lot of people here. Really great stargazing experience can be created to, to create, experiences. It connects our communities together. It's something that we all share. And I mean, face it, people that visit it, it amazes just about everybody. And I guess what we are hoping is that it will foster the next generation of scientists and explorers. We've won some awards over the last couple of years. The designation won the Diffusion of the Astronomy Award for the International Starlight Awards in the first year of their award ceremony. And Deep Sky Eye Observatory won the Sustainable Tourism Award offered by Parks Canada. So that was a really big honor. And we're going to continue working with other people in the community to build their starlight tourism experiences if they want to incorporate it in their businesses. I'm also the chair of the Starlight Committee, which helps other businesses as well to develop and create stargazing experiences. Something that people sometimes don't really think about, but some of the technologies that have benefit from space research and development, and the list is huge. My biggest one, I think, is the medical industry. I think that is, X-ray machines and, our cell phones, all that stuff has benefited from astronomy. And I think we have a lot. I think astronomy never gets the recognition or, the attention that it really deserves. And what a different planet we could be living on, if we were focused on our environment and, focusing on our planet and learning about the universe more, not just, pockets of people, but, the entire planet. So what are we doing about light pollution? For us here in Southwest Nova, in general, we're, teaching people about light pollution through presentations. And we're trying to change the laws around outdoor lighting. And I know the RASC and Dark Sky Association are also doing the same thing. We're working with all these we're not working with IDA yet, but we are working, of course, with Starlight Foundation and RASC a little bit as well, for sure. So the municipality of Argyle has nearly completed our new land use bylaw that's going to include and take into account protection of the night sky. And the reason they put it into the land use is that it holds a lot more power. A bylaw is easily dismissed, sometimes a bit of a challenge to pass, whereas this land use has more power to show people that our community, if you're moving here, these are the things that you really need to understand. We're a dark sky area. If you're building a new house, hey, the building inspectors are going to be able to show you what the proper lighting is, and the whole bit. So it's pretty exciting. And I would invite everybody from RASC that would like to take part in the first public hearing of this proposal that they're doing for land use. It's happening on June 23rd, and to register, you can send a message to Lori Murphy, L. Murphy at Municipality of Argyle. And it's all done online because of the COVID situation. So I think this will open up the door to a lot of folks that can kind of see where and how questions will be answered, especially if citizens have concerns. There's going to be a few that are going to call in, so we'll work with them. So we'd invite you to do that. Join us for that. So what can you guys do? Well, I'm sure a lot of you know some of this already, but when you're buying your lights, consider how much you need and where and when I need it. So consider the shielding is probably probably the most important as far as, in my opinion anyway, and the brightness, of course. You know, picking the right shielding, color, brightness, timing, and think of your neighbors too. And when I say think about your neighbors, not just think about the person next door, but if you live next to a habitat of some sort, think about, you know, the creatures that are living there and how it affects them. So, a family project that's pretty fun is, you know, building your own light fixture. I got this from the RASC, of course, and Robert Dick had forwarded this off to me. And yeah, you can build your own light fixture. It's a great template. It doesn't work on incandescent bulbs. I should have put a big warning there. It's made out, you know, you can make it out of paper and aluminum and paint it, put it around your light fixture and you're all set. Usually works good for, you know, anything that's not running too hot, that's running, you know, about 13 watts of power. And LEDs, it works pretty good. We've done a few of them. And we're actually promoting this as well through our different areas. So suggestions on how to approach your neighbor about concerning light pollution. Well, I guess for us, you know, and for everybody, it's to be tactful about it. You know, don't go in there, guns flying and, you know, telling people what to do. And nobody likes to be that way. They're not going to listen. Not that they might listen regardless, but some suggestions is, you know, remember to yourself that your neighbors do have the right to light up their property. That's a necessity. How they do it is a different story. I find striking up a conversation, you know, hey, how you doing? You know, nice to see you or nice to meet you. I haven't met you before, you know, especially if you haven't met anybody. It's good to kind of have some idle chit chat and, you know, ask for their help. Say, you know, hey, I was wondering if you could help me with something. And usually, like, people are pretty open to, yeah, what can I do to help you out? And that kind of opens the door to, well, you know, I like to look at the stars at night or whatever it happens to be. You know, look, you have a light there that's causing me a little bit of trouble, and I don't want to cause you any trouble, but, you know, I'd like to help you to you know, get your lighting needs met and, you know, solve my problem too. So, you know, help them to get the proper light fixture, offer to do whatever you can. And again, keep in mind, not everyone's going to agree with you. That's a normal fact of life. And sometimes you can't reason with the unreasonable. I learned that from I learned that from having kid, I guess. When a kid's 2 years old, sometimes you cannot reason with the unreasonable. Unfortunately, the world is, you know, full of various types of people, and we have to adapt and all of that sort of thing. So, what can you do for your community? You know, express your concerns to your provincial leaders, your councillors, your mayor. You know, go talk to them and bring some information about, you know, about light pollution, and show them, you know, areas, even maybe there's certain only parts of the areas that are causing problems. And you know, maybe you can come to maybe they can get you in the, you know, correct, connect with the right people, if it's a business or whatever it happens to be. If you need help, you know, contact the RASC, International Dark Sky Association, or, you know, send me an email, or the LPA committee from RASC. You know, write a letter to your local people, bring up the issue, go on the radio, you know, there's all kinds of different options. One thing we started for our region, you know, we're trying to find the bright spots by counting stars. So we started this project for the kids and the families. And essentially what you do, you just need a few things. It's a craft in a sense, and it also contributes to science. So, and I know there's other projects like this going on with the IDA, but we wanted something a bit local to help us directly. So what you do essentially is you create a picture frame with, you know, with the proper dimensions that I list here, like 20 by 20, and you attach a string to it. And you basically attach the string to your shoulder and go in the sky at night when it's clear. And you go and you basically hold it up at one spot in the sky, and you count the stars and you record it. And you do that 5 times. But basically this dimension of picture frame would divide the sky into like 40 parts, but you don't have to go count the 40 parts. But count the stars that you can see, and you can also count how many light bulbs you see from your backyard, and then basically go around, go to our website, Southwest Nova Stargazing, and Cap the Light, and go there and record your findings. And we will use that to help identify, you know, spots of light pollution that might be worse than others, or yeah. And I think that's a great project for kids, and we're hoping that and we're hoping to give away a telescope at the end too for the school kids that actually take part in this. So keep an eye out on that too. So here's a quiz. Can you identify good and bad lighting practices? So here's a gas station. So some of you may say good or bad, but here's another picture of that same gas station. Quite a different story, isn't it? Different lighting. First one was bad, this one's much better. And this is a picture as well of some very good design lighting where they need it on their pathway, on their walkway around their house. Not so good. Old style lighting, no shielding at all, shining up everywhere. It actually looks like, almost looks like Yarmouth, the main street of Yarmouth, but it's not. Yarmouth isn't quite that bad. So this one here is a little bit different. Again, there's probably could do a little better job. There's some sharp shadows. Light shining up in trees is not a good idea. So here's a picture from my cottage, and this is a single exposure. It's not a stacked image or a composite, and it's essentially just about a 30-second shot with a Canon 6D with an f2.8 lens of 30 seconds. So this light that I'm using is actually, we flickered a flashlight on for less than a second, literally like a flashlight on and off. And you can see on the left where the trees are lit up from the 1 second flashlight burst, and where it's lit up white. So the light on the right-hand side by my door is actually an eco light. And what you're seeing reflecting on the actual trees is reflection from the ground back towards the tree. And you can actually still see the stars. It's actually pretty nice light. And that's, you've probably heard this. The light was actually developed by Robert Dick and his company for low impact lighting. And we actually bought a few of these lights. They're actually very good. We enjoy them a lot. Very easy on the environment. And the awesome thing about them is they don't attract too many bugs. And trust me, in our neck of the woods, there's a lot of black flies and mosquitoes. So we want to try to not attract those. This photo was from a place in New Brunswick. A friend of mine sent me, Chris Wiedek, had sent me a photo of a newly designed lighting that he helped his neighbor implement. So you can see it's nice because it's not shining in his bedroom anymore of his neighbor's, like his own light. And it's shining, on the ground. It's not affecting too much light. The color is a little bit not quite as good as we'd like, but hey, you can't have everything right now. But what can you do? These lights, actually, I love these lights. I bought 100 of them actually for my camping area, and they're actually, I bought them at Costco. You can get 50 of them. You can get 8 of them for $50, and they're solar powered, and they're actually not, they don't have a huge blue component, as you can see on the left. But I wanted mine sort of, I wanted only red light. So I basically put a little piece of duct tape, red duct tape over them, and they're awesome pathway lights. The only thing I would suggest is raising them up about a foot higher off the ground, and they light up beautifully, and they last all night. So if you guys ever just go to the Costco website and do a search for like pathway lights, and I'm sure you'll find them. So, let's all do our part and help protect our starry night skies, like for generations to come, because if we don't do something soon, we will lose them. thanks very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, just fire them away.
Thanks, Tim. One of the members early on had a question, and you did answer in part this question, but they wondered, how would you suggest they make a difference on this beyond the individual actions to engage your community? Can you outline some of the stuff you went through to get where your community is with respect to bylaw change?
Sure, yeah. So the easiest thing, like we were in a slightly different category because the municipalities had invested money in tourism activities, and Starlight was one of the big ones. So for us, we kind of had half the work done for us because we created the observatory, and once it proved that it was sort of a popular thing, we had approached the council beforehand talking about light pollution, and it was kind of a challenge because they didn't quite understand. They understood why, but the thing is that there was a consulting company that came into Yarmouth and did a research on what sort of made Southwest Nova unique. And what they came up with was actually not the fact that we were Acadian or French or whatever, is that we had dark skies. So that helped to sort of pursue being able to approach council and say, look, we have, this is what we have. We're bringing tourism in. It's starting to generate revenue. And so when we went and approached the councillors individually, I guess, and I did a public presentation as well, and showing, I think the important thing is to show them individually, what it brings to your community, what it brings to the environment, and how you can save them money. Because let's face it, money talks, unfortunately. And if you can go in and tell them that, hey, if we replace these lights and we lower the brightness, no one's going to notice. It's going to keep our skies darker. It's going to, protect the environment. That's sort of a place to start. It also helps to bring in extra people to do talks that maybe have sort of more of a background, such as myself or some of the members from the RASC Light Pollution Committee. It always helps to have backup that way too. We created our own materials that we were able to share with the community. That also helps too.
Great, thank you. We're getting a lot of comments here about great talk, and thank you so much. It was very informative. And those are coming from people here and from away, Tim, so great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Haven't got any other questions on the board, so thank you. And maybe we'll have you come back at another time and see what the progress is like in your area, given the new legislation that is being discussed.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, that concludes our meeting for today. And so I'd like to thank everyone who attended today and hope you enjoyed our presentations. And like I said earlier, if you have any suggestions for topics you would like us to see covered, please send them to us. We'd love to hear from you. Our next meeting is September the 12th, but don't forget about our Nova East, the COVID edition, starting up on August 4th. So we'll keep everyone apprised. So stay well, be well, and look up. The sky is always open. Take care, everyone.